It's Matt, it's Jim, and today it's everything basketball. The AP Top 25. We see Duke on top after they beat Michigan on Saturday in DC. Matt, I mean, it's fun to look at these polls, but it really doesn't mean much at this point in time, does it?
No, no. I mean, it's similar to the AP poll in college basketball is similar to that of the AP
Mm-hmm.
poll in football, especially at this point in the season. It doesn't mean a whole lot. Like good for them. They moved Iowa State up to the 4 line.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's something that's kind of been based on the predictive models that you saw coming. Is a lot of places have had Iowa State on the 1 line in terms of their
Mm-hmm.
March Madness predictions. That almost feels like a response to that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you can go down the list here, and yeah, it's nice to see the rankings and that, and it
Right.
gives you something to go off of. But it's just not indicative of really any future success necessarily. This is solely just something that you can use as well for this. That's the main thing that you can use it for is for talking about it this point in the season.
Well, you can also get your bracketology set up for the office pool as well
Yep.
from this one. Right now, Duke might just be the best team in college basketball right now, but could be Arizona. Michigan had a chance. Iowa State's playing tough. Houston, UConn, Florida, Purdue, Gonzaga. I mean, the usual suspects are there. So, you know,
Hmm.
it's pretty much it's pretty much the people you would think would be in the top 10 are pretty much in the top 10.
Yeah, and look, I don't think it's. I think you've got a legitimate case that really you can go down to 14, I think, and make a legitimate case for these teams having a shot to win the national championship. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. Um, and then you get into that grouping of teams where really 16, 17, and 18, they're kind of sitting there, the Texas Tech, Alabama, North Carolina grouping in this AP poll. They're sitting there, and these feel more prediction based. All
Yeah.
three of those teams have suffered injuries. Alabama's were a little bit earlier. They're starting to get it rolling a little bit later here in the year. North Carolina and Texas Techs have come more recently to really two of their biggest players, and Caleb Wilson and for the love of God, I can't remember. I think it's Jacob Toppin that got hurt for Texas Tech, and he's a key piece of their operation there. So they have a group of hurt teams that I think you can probably look at and maybe go, well, if they get healthy, they could go on a run.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then you've got some. It feels like with this poll and the poll in football is towards the back half of this top 25 in the low 20s. You have this grouping. There's a couple of like non-power four teams that sit here in
Mm-hmm.
St. Louis and Miami of Ohio, and they feel like they're almost in there kind of ceremoniously.
I don't know. I'll tell you what. I think Miami of Ohio 27-0. I've seen Miami of Ohio play, and I've seen St. John's, Texas Tech, or Alabama, obviously
Mhm.
Southern North Carolina, BYU, Arkansas. I think Miami of Ohio deserves to switch places with St. John's. I mean, I see what Rick Pitino's done. Now, in fairness to St. John's, they have played much better than they have. They stumbled out of the gate. There's no question
Mhm.
about that. But I mean, Miami of Ohio plays in the MAC. The MAC is not the worst basketball conference in the world. It's not the best conference in the world. But you win 27 games at this level of college sports, it's got to get you something better than 21.
Yeah, you would like to think, and you would like to hope, but there's still ongoing conversation as to whether or not Miami makes the tournament if they do not win the MAC championship. That's something that's very real. It's a legitimate possibility, and based on the numbers, it's something that people have put out there and been like, "Hey, I'm not saying it's right or it's wrong. I'm just telling." and
No.
you and everybody else that it is a legitimate possibility based on the numbers that if Miami of Ohio does not win their conference tournament, that they won't be in March Madness. And that's more based on the level of competition that they've had to play as opposed to anything else. I agree with you wholeheartedly. What they've done is impressive. Winning 27 games in a row, it doesn't matter where you win them, how much better you are than the other team. That's still an impressive feat because it is sports. There's still 5 people out there on the floor and a rotation that maybe goes 10 deep that all have to work together every game to ultimately get to that outcome. So it's still something incredibly difficult and should be commended. But that doesn't change the outside factors that loom as we head towards Selection Sunday.
Yeah, the thing here's where I go on that. All right, if they don't, let's say for the sake of argument, Toledo beats them somewhere along the line in the conference tournament. Maybe it's not even a championship game, right? You got a 20, let's say at that point they won a game and then they lost, right? So let's say at that point you're probably going to be what, 31, something like that? 31-1?
Yeah.
In that realm, I mean, could be 30-1, I don't know. 31-1. Let's say they're 31-1 for the sake of argument. You cannot tell me that they don't deserve to be put in a field of 68 teams to prove themselves worthy or not worthy.
Yeah, no, I agree with the train of thought. When we talked about it last week, I just was under the assumption that they were going to make it. Quite honestly, regardless of whether or not they won that conference tournament or heck even lost a game in the interim between now and then. And this is just based off like stuff that I've seen and I've read is that they are far from a shoe-in for March Madness. So I agree with you. I don't think it's right. I don't think this is something that really should be up in the air or something that they have to worry about based on the work that they've done for the really probably, what would it be at this point? Like 7/8 of the season, somewhere in there. Like
they finished the season last year with a big run.
Yeah, so they've proved, or at least you would think they've proved themselves out and are worthy of that, but they don't see it as such. And I would say it's disappointing, but it's also just kind of the sad reality that is really these mid-major teams, and that some of them don't have a lot of leeway. I mean, dear God, you watch some of these conference tournaments and there are some of these conference games, and there are teams that are just going to get away. Like there are some losses on some of these schedules of these teams that are going to make it into the tournament where they just didn't show up that day. And they'll make it into the tournament because of where they're sitting in terms of their conference, while Miami of Ohio and St. Louis, they probably won't have the same leeway allowed when it comes selection time.
Yeah, the other part of the equation too is the conference perception, right? You're going to have obviously the SEC, the ACC, the Big 10, the Big 12, and in the case of basketball, the Big East are going to you get penalized for playing what they would call substandard or not. What is it? The NET rankings, that whole situation there. And so you're sitting there going, okay, here's a team that lost 8 games and they're in the tournament. They're in a conference that everybody in the world thinks is better than mine. I don't know. I just don't. I hate to see and it happens every year, whether it's Big 10, SEC, ACC, whatever. A 7 or 8 loss team is in the tournament, and there's a 1 or 2 loss team sitting on the outside looking at it.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of times we can look back with revisionist history on some of those matchups where they lose by double digits. Like I can sit here with revisionist history and tell you that I don't think Georgia was a tournament team last year. They lost by 20 to Gonzaga in that first round, and that was something that happened from the outset. They went up like 20-4 to start that basketball game. And I think the closest that Georgia ever got it was like 10 or 11 points.
Mhm.
So Gonzaga had them within arm's reach, and they were a team that had barely eclipsed 20 wins. I think they were sitting at like probably somewhere around, I think it's where they played 30 games. So I think they were in like a 21-9 clip headed into the tournament. And they just didn't show up. They laid an egg. And when you look at it and you look at that overall body of work, you can draw a legitimate question as to whether or not they should have been there over some of these smaller mid-major teams. Now, I would say a counterpoint to that has been really over these past 2 years with NIL, these Cinderella stories in these mid-major teams, you've kind of seen a decline in terms of their success rate and the upsets that you see from these teams.
Right.
Because the way that the talent distribution works in NIL now is if you have a guy pop on a mid-major team, then guess what? One of these Power Four programs is going to come take him from you. And though I think it's a greater concentration of talent, and you are less likely to have those mid-major teams make runs like this because overall they just aren't talented because they aren't able to retain their talent every year in the transfer portal. So I think there's legitimate arguments on both sides. But when something like this in Miami, Ohio, and I'll be honest, I think St. Louis is probably going to be deserving regardless of where they land. Like this, them getting in the AP poll is indicative of the success that they've had throughout the year, even if it does feel, like I said earlier, ceremonious. So I think they do deserve to be in, but I think there are legitimate questions that can be raised regarding, whether you let these less successful power conference teams in versus some of the mid-major teams that may be looking for an at-large bid.
Yeah, let's go back a number of years, basically. It took Gonzaga probably 7 or 8 years before they proved to the committee that they were deserving of getting in the tournament. And on the heels of Gonzaga came St. Mary's from the same conference, the West Coast Conference. University of San Francisco has been one of those teams. Of course, they had a little bit of luck because back in 1960, that's where they basically had a super team back in 1960 with Bill Russell and the folks that they had. But my point is this: I guarantee you, if Miami of Ohio at the beginning of the season were trying to schedule Michigan or some of these other teams, they wouldn't play them.
Yeah, and that's really more of that would be more, I think, of an avoidance strategy from those power teams. Is they don't like. Well, typically speaking, they don't like the smaller teams that play well. Like just in general, you don't really want to have to play those guys because then it's, well, look who you lost to, right? Like it feels like you have everything to lose and nothing to gain if you're those power programs scheduling them. That's the way it's looked at. Like I think when you go back in like football, Cincinnati had to prove themselves out for a couple of years to get where they were. And I think they were deserving still going back to that game they played against Alabama back in 2021. But I think you have to be careful because not all cases are the same here.
No, it's true.
So like when you look at that Cincinnati team and the way it was built back in 2021, and you look at some of these teams that, like, they're built on legitimate talent. Cincinnati had multiple NFL draft picks selected that year. I think they were second in terms of draft picks taken in that draft following their playoff appearance. So those teams are talented, and that proves out. And I think in this case, when you have a tournament like this, is you can make these assumptions based on what your analytics are telling you, and that's one thing. But I mean, you've got in total with the last four in a 68 bid tournament here. Like it's not like we're selecting the 4 best teams. It's not like we're selecting the 12 best teams. You have this extensive playoff format so that teams like Miami of Ohio can lose a game and go on special runs like this and still make the tournament as an at-large bid. Like
Mhm.
it should be extended out to where they have that option. And I'm hopeful that they get that opportunity. And, all of this can be for naught if they go win that conference tournament. But I think it's a worthwhile hypothetical that we're working with.
Yeah, I think, again, this is not what's, it's not that I want to see, prove them wrong, prove they don't deserve there. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Is don't exclude them because their power rankings versus blah blah blah. The power rankings don't mean crap. I personally want to see them play on the court. Put them
Yeah.
on the court, and if they beat them by 30 points, then I'm wrong and you're right.
Yeah. And that's what I think that's what people like. I think that's what they want / hope for in college football is like they want to see these hypotheticals that they have in their heads played out.
Right.
And it's a bit more of a fantasy land in the world of football, but this is reality in college basketball. This is something that's happened time and time again, and
Mhm.
there's proof behind it. And so models like that, when they go out and if they tell me that's like that Miami of Ohio is not a tournament team if they don't win the MAC championship, I just
Mhm.
have to vehemently disagree with it. You want to get numbers involved when you're in a very in a very selective process where you don't have a bunch of teams. You have 64 teams. You have this leeway to do this, and I see no reason not to.
We're talking about in college football, we're talking about 12, right?
Mm-hmm.
In college basketball, 68. How in God's name, would you sit there and go, well, maybe not? It's like, well, you got 68 teams in the tournament. Why not give, a team a chance to prove themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what should happen. It's just a matter of will these people get lost in the numbers? And I think there's also a case to be made that you can also turn it around on the other end and be like, well, they've got 68 teams they have to like base this off of. We've got to go on some metrics. Otherwise, we're just kind of picking who we want. And I think that's fair, but I think it's got to be, and this isn't a new thought process, but
No.
a balance of record and metrics are something
Mhm.
that are necessary. You have to take their entire body of work into account as a whole. It's something that I wonder how well they are able to do it given the quick turnaround, because I know they're in that room and this is something that they work on and study for a while, but when push comes to shove, those tournaments, some of them end Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon, and those rankings come out later that day.
Yeah, but in fairness, those are the big guys.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not like the little guys have to wait for the little guys at the end of the day.
Yeah.
What I just honestly, from my standpoint, the SEC, the ACC, the Big Ten, and the Big 12, they just basically look there and go, okay, how many teams can we stuff in this tournament from our conference? Because they benefit from it. It's
Yeah.
it's tough if you're Mike Oresco when Mike was there at the, as the conference head at the American Athletic Conference and the Mountain West and some of these other and the West. We talked about the West Coast Conference with St. Mary's and teams they've got. I mean, they got a snowball's chance in hell when you've got
Mhm.
those four power leagues, five with counting the Big East in basketball, trying to wedge in one or two.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's where I think you do have a legitimate case. People have made this case really in these past 2 years of this 12-team format, talking about the SEC.
Mhm.
And I think it's fair. I think there's a reasonable question to be brought up regarding the actual power that are in these conferences, right?
Mhm.
Like they've been like, well, it's basically been like they're just putting these teams in here because they've got that SEC logo.
Mhm.
Same goes for all power conferences, I think,
Yeah.
in college basketball, that there are going to be some of these mid-major schools that have legitimate rosters
Mhm.
and they have had very good seasons, but they didn't win their conference tournament and they're getting stuck behind and I mean, I can say this pretty honestly here. They'll get stuck behind a Georgia basketball team that just has not played
Mhm.
consistently well all year. They'll get stuck behind some of these middling schools. Like UCLA is now a team that is in position to make a run or to
Mhm.
make March Madness. They're a team that got housed by Michigan State on the road.
Mhm.
Now they backed it up with a good win at home
Mhm.
against Illinois, but they're a team that hasn't been good all year. Like these are teams that have not been good all year, but they're allowed a lot more leeway. And to an extent, you have to allow that because they are playing, as you would view, objectively more difficult schedules. But when you have teams that are doing some special stuff, if they're only losing 2 or 3 games in a season and they come up short in a conference tournament, like there can only
Mhm.
be one conference winner. That doesn't mean there's only one good basketball team from that conference. And I think it's just a hard line for the committee to walk overall. And it's something that feels or not feels it's imperfect in its process. And it's something that leads you and everybody else to a conversation of like, well, we need to expand this thing. Like that's the automatic assumption. It's like expansion, 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 no matter the tournament format you're talking about. But at certain point, you know, you're dealing on this back end with imperfection, and there is no true right answer when you're dealing with multiple things that are imperfect and comparing them against each other.
I would prefer, and this is something I've, basically thought, okay, let's see if anybody pays attention, cares about it. I would like to see all the panel, the people who choose the games, not be aligned with any conference. I would like a rotation of 8 or 10, whatever you want to call them, guys who get in there, who are from the NBA, who are from and let them analyze who the best teams are. Let them put in their things. So there's no bias as to, okay, what's going to happen here. Now, in fairness, on the other side, to your point, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are seasons where um, 7 or 8 SEC teams get in, and 4 or 5 ACC teams get in, and the first thing they yell about is that, oh well, the SEC forced them in. Well, they didn't really force them in; they deserved it. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and so you have those arguments, but I would rather see a blue ribbon panel of 8 people who are given the opportunity. They know college basketball. They could be former coaches. They could be whatever, broadcasters. I don't care what it is, but figure it out. Let them spend the time from, say, let's say they from the first of the year, they take it from the first of the year, and then they move forward to tournament time and get you the 68 teams. I just think, regardless of whether it's fair or not, perception is that the power conferences strong arm people when they're in that room behind the door, or they make deals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
And
that
that may or may not happen. I'm just saying the perception is there.
yeah, and that's when you're dealing in like that's the politics of it, right? And there's just no I mean, as much as it sucks to say, like there's no way that any average fan or person will ever know like true backdoor
No.
politicking, and it's very possible that it's something that happens. I there was speculation regarding the ACC's commissioner Jim Phillips,
Mhm.
in terms of the way the college football playoff panned out, like
Right.
that stuff is real, at least in terms of the theories that go out there, but there's just no way you're ever going to
Well,
prove it.
Notre Dame was mad at him.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Felt like it was backstab. They felt like
Mhm.
they were backstabbed. And so it's something that probably does happen to in a little
Which,
bit.
by the way, is pretty rich, given the fact that the ACC took all of the Notre Dame's. Notre Dame doesn't seem to have any problem taking their money from the Olympic sports, but they get upset whenever you know Phillips picks Miami over Notre Dame.
Yeah, almost a parasitic relationship they have with the ACC.
Right.
So just to go back to that larger point, it's like
Mhm.
these conferences, I think there is a legitimate case to be done wrong, but I also can go back and say that odds are when you're dealing in these teams and you're talking about these
Mhm.
teams, they're not going to win a national championship. It's a similar circumstance to there's like I think genuinely there's maybe 12 to 14 teams in that are ranked right now that could, in the realm of possibility, win a national championship in basketball this year. Like that's what you're talking about. Now, you want to talk about like whether or not these kids deserve it and they've earned it. That's one thing, and that's good, and I can absolutely get on board with it. I also can sit here and tell you that whether or not I think Miami of Ohio is deserving of a spot, regardless of whether or not they win their conference championship, that regardless of whether or not they make it, I don't think it's going to really impede on the fact that of whether or not Miami of Ohio can or cannot win a national championship in basketball this year. Because I think if they don't make the tournament, it's an obvious no. And if they do make the tournament, it's still going to be a no.
Well, let me go back again for back in the days for a little while. Let's go back to Jim Larrañaga's George Mason team.
Mm-hmm.
Jim Larrañaga's George Mason team beat three number one teams, during the season in the tournament to get to the Final Four.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you could make the argument, well, they're not going to win a national championship, and they didn't. They didn't. Yeah. They got bounced. But they sure as hell made it to a Final Four. We don't have to go that far back to FAU. And before that, Florida Gulf Coast.
Yeah.
So, I mean, my only point is this. Are they going to win a national championship? The odds are very much against them. Should they not be given an opportunity to get into the field to see where they go? I would rather see 2, 3, maybe 4, 5, whatever. Let's say 4 or 5 teams that come from the non-power conferences, and we're including the Big East in this one. Given the opportunity to play and to prove it. That's all I'm saying. It's, yeah, you got your metrics, fine. But a 9-loss Tennessee team doesn't belong in the damn tournament in my mind.
Yeah. And talked about it. I think it also impacts like how did you lose those basketball games? Who did you lose those basketball games to? All of that matters. The analytics, this, that, and the other, all of that matters. And you are 100% correct. They hang banners for Final Fours at a lot of these places. So those hang all the same that a national championship one does. So there is that aspect. And my only counter argument would be that, the George Mason, even FAU, talking about recently, those teams were in a different model of college athletics overall. They had talent acquisition that was significantly different than college athletics right now. And I'm not saying it's impossible. In fact, I really hope it happens. Like I would love to get more. I'm one of those guys that goes through there and tries to strategically like pick my upsets. Just a dumb idea and its basis. But like I want those upsets. I want the madness back in March Madness. It's something that hasn't been there as much. The number of upsets are down over the past 2 years. It's something that I prefer to have in March Madness. It makes it a lot more fun. It makes it more entertaining. It's a better watch overall. And getting teams like St. Louis and Miami of Ohio in there is something that can improve that product because they do have that level of talent. Like that's where you have to come in. You have to have these legitimate evaluators. And there's always going to be an argument for bias because everybody's got to graduate from somewhere. At least you would think so if they're sitting in a room making a decision like this.
Right.
So that will never escape us unless we just went straight computers. But then you get into computers and all this
already been there
sitting up. So it's ultimately an imperfect process. Always has been, always will be,
Yeah,
forever, evermore.
yeah, I totally understand. And look, you're absolutely right that whenever a team succeeds and you're a mid-major, you get rated by the big boys.
Hmm.
Okay, and then you have to rebuild it again,
Yeah.
uh, if you're lucky to do it. Uh, I just think from the standpoint of, for me, let's. I just talked about the mid majors. I'm going to make a quick pivot here. Uh, to see Iowa State win the championship this year would be phenomenal to me.
Hmm.
Just like Indiana winning the national, the football championship.
Yeah.
These are not schools that people think of as powers in any sport.
Yeah.
Indiana for basketball, yes. Iowa State, been a long time since the Cyclones have hoisted any banner of significance. So I, I get what you're saying, and from my standpoint, I'd like to see the mid majors get there. If they can't, I'm not upset if one of these teams that in the top 10, 15 that are not the typical blue bloods find a place at the table and win.
Yeah. And I mean, you can scroll down because it is interesting to see, and not all of them are like this, but there's different entries into the AP top 25, and it's got a little more spice, I think, than it normally would, or it
Mhm.
has had in the past heading into this. Because like you've got a team like Nebraska.
I
Nebraska
was
was
about to say that.
undefeated at one point this year. Like
Yeah.
they've played some fantastic basketball. They're sitting there waiting. Texas Tech's another one of those schools. They haven't really hung a banner for anything.
No,
Uh,
Texas Tech hasn't had teams since Bob Knight coached there.
yeah. And then you go like BYU, another one of those schools,
Been years. Danny
Yeah,
Ainge. Yeah.
yeah. And so it's filled with teams like that, and I think there's teams kind of sitting on the outside of that top 25 that are also non-traditional powers that have been there.
Well, there's I'm looking real quick here of teams that got votes. Wisconsin got 47. St. Mary's, who has always been a tough out in the tournament, 30. Villanova, 15. University of Miami of Florida, not to be confused with Ohio, 10. Utah State from the Mountain West, 8. NC State, 7. SMU, 4. A&M, 3. That's Texas A&M, I should say. Iowa, 3. UCF, 3. High Point, 2. Stephen F. Austin, 2. And Navy, bringing up the rear with a single vote. Um, evidently, one of the teams, one of the coaches uh, has a fondness for Navy. Um, by the way, just so people know, you can't vote for your own team in the in this in these polls, these coaches polls.
Thank God.
If that counts for anything.
Yeah. Which I mean that should be, or at least you would think it's something of a kind of a relief, but some people will probably still take issue, say there's biases one way or another. Because I mean, there's people that bring it up. They're like, man, so I don't know why so and so hates this team or that team.
Mhm.
And I mean, they talk about it in the coaches polls a lot. Like there was, oh God, who was it? Oh Lord, there was a. It may have been Luke Fickle at Wisconsin, uh,
Okay.
that left like this past season. They just left Georgia out of it. He just left Georgia out of the top 25 altogether of his coaches poll. It's
Mhm.
like it's a team that was in the playoff isn't in your top 25. Is it bias, or is it just a pure mental like slip and omission? And I say that because like as an exercise at home, go sit down and try to write out your top 25 teams without looking at a poll that's already been given to you. Like
Mhm.
go try to rank them yourself and see if you forget somebody. I bet you probably will.
I will tell you that from, what was it, 1982 or 3 through 2002, I had a football vote for UPI.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly, I mean, I took it seriously. I mean, there were nights there were days when I was doing a game that I would stay up, into the wee hours for a West Coast game just
Mm-hmm.
so I could see, that before I turned in my ballot. And I, a lot of times, and those are back in the days when the polls actually decided who the championship, who was the champions. It hadn't gotten to the BCS yet.
Yeah.
And so, um, I can say then and now, a number of times the votes will be taken and handed in under the name of, Luke Fickle or whomever, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's an assistant coach or an SID who does the actual voting.
Yeah.
Because the coach basically doesn't have time, doesn't care.
Yeah.
They may say that, but they don't. And so, is there biases? Of course. I mean, they're human, so they're going to make, are they? If somebody's pissed at Kirby and they say, "Well, screw it, with my vote is not going to matter. If one vote's not going to make that big of a difference, so I leave them off my ballot." If enough do, yeah, it would make a difference. But is it fair? No. But is it a human response? Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, or I can't see like a Bob Knight or someone like that. I don't know that Bob ever voted, but maybe let's say he did. I don't think that there would be a Big Ten team that he would put ahead of himself.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you have that's not an unreasonable. Like these guys are competitors.
Right.
Like if somebody beats you, you're probably not going to be too thrilled about it.
Right.
Doesn't mean you hate the guy or anything like
No,
that.
no. It's like, but strategically, right?
Mm-hmm.
Strategically, you're thinking, all right, how close can I get? What's it going to take for me to get above 5? Let's say you're ranked at 7 and
Mm-hmm.
you won and you want to get to 6.
Yep.
Strategically, how do I get that vote? How do I
Yeah.
get those votes to get me over?
Yeah.
Do I have friends in the SEC who will vote for me?
Yeah.
Get to push it up, and when I say the SEC, it could be the Big Ten, could be any of them.
Yeah. What if I
And
just leave number 6 completely off my ballot?
yeah, there's that too. So there's a lot of different behind the scenes permutations, which leads to the exact kind of thing that we've been talking about for the last almost 40 minutes, and that is speculation as to actually what happens in the room.
Yeah.
I have seen Selection Sunday from inside CBS's headquarters, and they literally don't get that information, which has to be loaded in graphics. The graphics are actually loaded by one of CBS's graphics people at the site, which I think it was last time it was in Dallas, right?
I have no idea.
Yeah, it was. I think they met at a hotel in Dallas is where I think they
Mhm.
met last year. But it doesn't matter. It could be Indianapolis, wherever it is. It is.
Yeah.
Anyway, so they get a panel by panel. So nobody really knows what's going on until when those guys say they see it for the first time. They say that's true. The moment it pops up on the screen, it's the moment they've seen it.
Yeah. And I mean that's something that's been contested about the football ones, right?
Right.
Is everybody's like, well, they knew. Like they knew prior.
Mhm.
Probably not. Like if basketball does it, why is football any different? But yeah,
You mean those Tuesday night things where they
oh
pop
yeah,
up on the screen?
yeah. Well,
Yeah, those are things that it's fed to them, to a graphics operator, and then when the graphics operator has finished the panels, they give the clear and they go, okay, punch it up.
yeah, and I mean that's how it should be because if you take that at face value and that you actually believe it, then it kind of absolves some of the, I guess, bias from these network analysts and
Talking
stuff
heads.
like that. Yeah. But even then, it's still not enough to make people happy.
No, and I look, I will tell you, for me, and I think if you asked a Clark Kellogg or any of the, Andy Katz or any of the guys who are sitting at the desk, right? They'll tell you they'd rather see it for the first time and react to it with a fresh reaction than actually know ahead of time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can see sometimes. I mean, I believe me. I know some of these guys. They're not actors, so when they seem surprised, it's not like they're feigning surprise. They're surprised.
Yeah. So, I mean, that I don't really know why it would matter at the end of the selection either. Like, so what? Somebody didn't like this team getting in or that team getting
Right.
left out. Like, what does it matter? These guys are analysts. You're asking at a certain point, it gets like you're almost working on a juxtaposition. Is you're asking these guys as analysts to give their opinion,
Right.
but then you also want them to kind of reel in their opinion and their bias. Like bias is part of your opinion to a certain extent, which is why, the availability of multiple opinions is a good thing.
Hmm.
But, people get mad regardless of what happens, and they're not mad at them inherently. They're mad at the result. But boy, they make a great scapegoat.
I I personally don't mind if somebody has a bias. To be honest,
Yeah.
because that's truthful to me. You know, it and what was it? How many years ago was Auburn really good in basketball? A couple years ago.
Last year. I
Was it
mean,
last year?
yeah, they were good last year. They were
I
good.
couldn't remember because Chuck was
23.
all over it. I mean, Chuck,
Yeah.
he's not hiding 1 minute that he's rooting for Auburn,
And it makes
and
like
I don't care about that. That's great. Good for Chuck.
yeah, you can't
Auburn.
you can't have like a full panel of that, right?
No,
Otherwise you just got like, and now you're
right.
just hanging out in the living room with your buddies pretty much. But you need that aspect of these shows to
Hmm.
make it feel like more human and connecting with your audience to an extent, because you can
And
offer really
honest as well.
huh?
And honest as well.
Yeah, it's like honest and transparent. That people appreciate that. I appreciate it. I know who Chuck was rooting for, whether he said it or not. So yeah, get it out there in the open. Like you don't need to just make your whole segment about it, but it's good to have it be known.
I was on a conference call. They do media calls prior to the Final Four, and Jim Nance was on it. Jim, of course, was a graduate of Houston, and Houston was going, was
Mhm.
had a chance to get to a national championship game. And Jim said 100%. He goes, "Look, I'll call the game. If it ends up being Houston, because nobody knew what was going to happen at that point."
Mhm.
And he said, "Look, if it's Houston, I'll call the game. Do I? Who? There's no doubt. I'm telling you right now, I want Houston to win. But that doesn't mean I can't call a straight up basketball game. Is I've called Houston's games 4 or 5 times already this year, and it is what it is. When the game is over, I can go over and shake hands and celebrate with them. But during the game, I'll call the game. Well, that's the play-by-play guy. The color analyst is a little different. It's a little bit. I mean, Curb Street he got ran out of the state of Ohio.
Yeah.
By the Ohio State fans who, and he's never hard on them. I mean, he's honest, but he's never hard on them. But they thought he was, so he lives in Kentucky.
Yeah.
Because people they couldn't take it anymore.
Yeah. And
s-
I think there's a really good like public perception versus actual reality
mhm,
with Kirk Herbstreit, because like he got ran out of the state of Ohio, right? And then
right.
you go back to that 2022 Peach Bowl, and I mean he's in the post game presser and he's welled up with tears,
Mhm,
he was upset about it.
mhm,
And so it it's it's something where people believe one thing, but you catch them in the moments of vulnerability, and you see
mhm.
a complete other thing that completely contradicts what the public perception is. But public perception drives narratives more than anything else.
Well, and you got to know, we were just talking about Chuck, right?
Hmm.
His relationship with Auburn has always been tight.
Yeah.
His daughter went to Auburn. This is for him, Auburn is his home.
Yep.
So he knows the head basketball coach. He knows all the players. It would upset me. Not just I'm not an Auburn fan. But it would upset me as a fan that he wouldn't care about the team that, basically that was how he got to the NBA, was going through Auburn.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's what people, like fans of the teams, that's what they want to hear. You don't want to hear that a guy like Todd Gurley did an interview. He was asked about the transfer portal. He's like, heck, man, if I was around during the transfer portal, he said, I might have gone everywhere. I might have went to Miami. He said, I probably would have done my first year at Georgia. I might have went to Miami. I might have went to USC, somewhere like that.
He could have gone anywhere.
He said, I may have transferred, every year if it was available to me in the option. It's like, as someone who loved Todd Gurley growing up, that's not the ideal thing that I like hearing. But it is there. I would have much rather preferred been like, no, like I loved the University of Georgia as my home. Like that's something that you would rather hear. And it's something that it really endears the fans to you.
Well, it's also, I mean, I think Tebow has been pretty solid on his love and his relationship with Florida. And there's a couple of Georgia guys. I can't remember who they are. I mean, they don't hide the fact that they're Bulldog fans, and they shouldn't.
Yeah,
they shouldn't. They should be proud of the universities they went to and want them to win. I mean, that's the human aspect to me. It's much more human for you to want the team to win you grew up playing for or you grew up rooting for.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's almost like if they don't come out and say that, it's like almost like dreams shattered or like reality shattered. It changes your perception and your view of that person or that athlete.
We'll switch just on this topic just for a moment to baseball. I worked with Joe Castiglione for a couple of years. And when there couldn't have been anybody happier to get the Boston Red Sox job than Joe Castiglione. He grew up as a Red Sox fan. He ate, drank, and slept the Red Sox, even though he was doing Cleveland Indians games and Milwaukee Brewers games with me. And I can guarantee you that those were not his two favorite teams. They were. He enjoyed working for the organizations. He gave 100%. But when I was doing local sports, when we were doing the local games, right? I wanted my announcers to be homers.
Yeah.
Objective, but homers.
Yeah.
I'm saying, look, they were saying, well, we need to be more objective. And I go, no, we don't. Okay. And here's why. We are broadcasting to a fan base. Okay. We want them to tune in tomorrow and the day after tomorrow and every other day we have telecasts.
Yep.
And the only way we can do that is if you're as pissed off that they lost as they are, or upset, or happy that we won.
Yeah.
So please, give me some enthusiasm here as to why am I listening to you if you're not, again, objective, but and I tell you, the guy who really was the gold standard was Vin Scully, and Vinny would open up his game by saying, "Welcome to Dodger baseball today. It's a beautiful day, at Chavez Arena." And he was as much a homer as anybody else, but he understood the process of how, to make certain that the fans knew that if they made a mistake, meaning the Dodgers made a mistake or they did something bonehead, he would call them out on it, and the players didn't care.
Yeah,
we're just being honest with it.
It's something that Dave O'Brien, the Red Sox play-by-play guy on TV for NESN, he's been highly criticized. Like, people do not like him because he does not feel like he's wants the Red Sox to win. Like, that is the general perception of Dave O'Brien. Dave O'Brien's a really good broadcaster in terms of, like, you listen to him do a basketball game. He does college basketball in the off season. You listen to him do those college basketball games. He's a really good announcer. He does really good in this play-by-play. But he's been very criticized. Like, he called, I remember I think it was the game last year, when Garrett Crochet had pitched 8 2/3 scoreless against the Yankees. He was going for the complete game shutout. He had like 11 strikeouts, something like this. Aaron Judge was his final batter, and he threw him a fastball low and inside, and Aaron Judge hit a homer off of it to tie it up in the top of the ninth with 2 outs, right? And Dave O'Brien sounded over the moon when Aaron Judge hit this home run, and it really pissed people off. And you're tuned into the Red Sox broadcast. If I wanted to hear people get amped when Aaron Judge hits a home run, I'm going to turn on the Yes Network, and
I was going to say, flip over to Dave Sims on WFAN. He'll be happy to accommodate you.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Dave Sims is a really good example of it as well, because he's a guy that did very well in Seattle, calling the Mariners games, and he was loved in Seattle. But it's got to be like, if there is a team that you grew up loving, then when they give you the call like the Yankees did, then you're probably going to go call those games, because if I'm being honest, you're probably just going to get a little bit better of a product. Like, you have to truly love something, I think, to get the absolute best product out that you can. And, you can really love Mariners baseball. And I'm sure he did. I'm sure that he came to love the Mariners, the city of Seattle. And I think eventually he probably got to a point to where he loved them. But man, there's just something different about the team.
He also won 6, Washington Sportscaster of the Year awards from the state of Washington. So even though he lived in New York and had an apartment in Seattle, he became very much loved there. But like you said, if you are, if you're going to replace John Sterling, who do you replace him with? You have to replace him with somebody who is going to give you that enthusiasm and give it to you in a way that he knows the Yankees. I mean, Dave knows the Yankees. Dave was one of the first broadcasters that WFAN hired when they started their, all sports talk shows. So, he had a long history of following the team. Brilliant writer, by the way. He started off his career as a writer, and he covered the Yankees for the New York Daily News for a while. So, you're right about that. And I will never ever quite understand why John Henry and the guys took Dave O'Brien over Don Orsello, who to me was as good a broadcaster as in the business, and he was a Red Sox broadcaster.
Yep, that's a fantastic question that Red Sox fans have been asking since Don left. Never will get an answer on that. We just get to live in eternal frustration over the change.
And in fairness, Don has been nothing but a gentleman about the whole thing. It took him 2.5 seconds after he left there to get the job in San Diego, where they love him in San Diego. And I'm pretty sure he's not missing the snow out there in Southern California in his lovely home. But you got to feel for a guy like Orsello, who gave all that time. He gets aced out by a guy who really was more of a national announcer than he was. And again, this is no shade on Dave. I've known Dave for a long time. I like Dave. But Dave came in as an ESPN broadcaster. Okay. And they liked Dave's, delivery. They liked everything about Dave, except for the fact they forgot that Dave wasn't a Red Sox guy. Dave's never been a Red Sox guy.
Yeah. And that's what I was saying is like he is a fantastic play-by-play guy.
Mhm.
He can do a terrific job, like
Yeah.
unbiased. When you just listen to him call a game, he does a very
Mhm.
good job. But the problem is that you're not tuning in to listen to him call a game. You're
Mhm.
tuning in to hear him call the Red Sox, right?
Mhm.
So you want that feeling of it doesn't need to be like he doesn't need to be in there with his ball
Mhm.
cap on and a flag waving around says Red Sox #1
Right.
fan, right? But he's got to feel like he's at least kind of rooting on the
Mhm.
team, like egging them on a little bit,
Right.
instead of just just calling the game as it is. And he does a good
Well,
job calling.
I mean,
That's
if you look at
sounds
over the years, right? Um, Greg Brown, who calls Fox's, replaced Joe Buck as Fox's lead baseball announcer,
mhm.
is the voice of the Dodgers. Okay,
Yep.
if you didn't know that, and you just listened to the game, the World Series games, you would know. I mean, he did a very good job of just playing it straight. When he's with the Dodgers, he's a Dodger guy. You
Yep.
know, there are guys who can do that. One of the most famous Red Sox announcers was Kurt Gowdy, and
Mhm.
Gowdy got drummed out a bit during the '75 World Series because when the Red Sox didn't win, it was you could tell in his voice that Gowdy was emotionally upset. You
Yeah.
know, it he was the ultimate professional, but had about a 2 minute you know show of emotion, which you know basically put Dick Enberg in that broadcast.
Yeah. And that's like and that's where you get to it's similar to what we were talking about with the selection process. Like you're asking for perfection in what is an imperfect process. Like it's
Right.
impossible to find a happy, perfect medium on the in between of them. Dave
Mhm.
O'Brien does a fantastic job calling
Mhm.
regular games. He doesn't do as good of a job calling Red Sox games.
Mhm.
And it's hard to get that perfect mixture because I mean for as good a job as oh god, what'd you say his name was calling the World Series this past year?
Greg Brown.
Craig Brown. As good of a job as he did, and he did do a very good job.
Mhm.
There were still people that were like, "Yep, of course, this guy's the Dodgers announcer." Like, it's impossible to be perfect in it.
Mhm. Well, they have Vin Scully, and we'll roll this one out with that. The famous situation with Kirk Gibson calling Kirk Gibson's home run in that game in the World Series against the Eckersley was pitching for the Athletics. And between innings, he said to Harry Coyle, who was the director, he said, Harry, he saw um, Gibson go down the tunnel. And he said, if Gibson comes out of the tunnel with a bat in his hands, he's going to hit. There's no, and Tommy Lasorda will have to tackle him to get
Mhm.
him not from walking into the on deck circle. So it was the fact that NBC could set that whole thing up for one reason, because Vin Scully knew the Dodgers and knew that if he saw Kirk Gibson with a bat in his hand, Kirk Gibson was going to come up. Whether he was going to get hit or not, who knew? But
Yeah.
Kirk Gibson was going to. And when the ball went out of the ballpark, Vin Scully took his headset off, walked back, watched watched the action go for about a minute and a half, almost 3 minutes actually. Walks back, puts his headset on, and continues the game, allowing the crowd to react to what happened.
Yeah. And
And you can't get more professional than that. He knew what was going to happen. Didn't know he was going to hit a home run, but he knew Gibson was coming up. And again, not that we're picking on Dave O'Brien, but it seems like we are. The
it just happens to be our example.
He's our example, Dave. Dave, Dave is a guy who likes doing national work and does a good job.
Yeah.
And there's no problem with that. But there are markets in this country he could get away with that. without any problem whatsoever.
Yeah.
It's not going to be Boston.
No, it is the wrong market to have that kind of middle ground in.
Well, and then when you replace a Bostonian and a guy who went to school in Boston, in Don Orsello, who was loved by the Boston fans, you're not doing yourself any favors, and that's the front office.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, yeah, 100%.
Because there happened to be another opening at that time, and it was in Chicago, the Cubs, and he was in that race. Boog Sciambi got that job,
Mm-hmm.
and that's another good. He's another good announcer.
Yeah,
and he got that gig, and so Dave got the Red Sox job. So, could he have gotten away with it in Chicago? Probably, maybe. I don't know. The Cubs fans are not quite as upset about the broadcasters as they are in Boston or New York or and Philly. But it is what it is. We can only hope that the broadcast that the teams understand the importance of somebody that fans like
mm-hmm.
and keep them around.
Yep.
But I know there's a lot of good young broadcasters out there who are doing a good job in Major League Baseball, and you hope for them that their teams have their back.
Yeah. It's something where you almost wish like broadcasters were able to have like you can almost safeguard the information, at least when it comes to sports broadcasters. You could safeguard their information. Like no one needs to know what team this guy grew up rooting for or what school he went to, because the only thing that can come from that is claims of bias, one way or another. And while I think there are very limited cases where they may be true, in a lot of cases, they're just anything but.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I mean, it's one of those things where you just have to, we all have our favorite people, and I'm Bob Carpenter, who was the Nationals announcer from the time the Nationals became a team in Washington, retired this year, and I was very happy to see Dan Coco, who's a young guy who started with them as their field reporter, and then went to their pregame, postgame guy, and he filled in for Carpenter, because a lot of people don't realize that during the season, the play-by-play guys and some of the color guys get a week to 10 days off during the season. Usually it's during a series where nobody really cares about that series. And so Dan got a chance to fill in for Bob, and I was happy to see them, give this kid who has been with the Nationals for, he came into the team about 10 years ago, grew up in that broadcast system, and was rewarded for his good work. And to me, that's what if you pour your heart and soul into it, and you should be given the opportunity if you deserve it, and he did. So I'm happy to see that happen for him. And by the way, one last thing as we're on our way out the door, the Braves announced their new Braves network.
Braves Vision.
Braves Vision. We'll know more about it soon, but we will find out. And,
which is funny because it's what they used as like their pregame intro for a while. When they like right before the first pitch and like the team ran out, they used to. They may still, and I just don't remember. But they used to like throw up on the big screen right before they ran out, "You're now watching Braves Vision."
Mm-hmm. Well, they're doing what a lot of teams are doing. If you sign up early for the tickets, I mean, for the deal, you get 2 tickets to a regular season baseball game.
Yeah, which
is kind of standard practice at this point.
Yeah, the promotions.
Yep. All right, boys and girls. Come back tomorrow. It's Wednesday. We'll figure out what we're going to be doing between now and then. I'm sure there'll be something that pops, and we'll have a chance to chat about it. Until then, have a lovely weekend. A lovely weekend. It's only Tuesday. Have a lovely day, and we'll see you tomorrow, buddy. Take care.